Hi, welcome to the Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches podcast. I'm Justin Janowski, your host. And the first two times I tried to start a coaching business, I failed. I got 2 clients and I was out of business. Then I got 4 clients and I was out of business. And I took a few years working under another coach to learn how to build a system around sales and marketing. And then I relaunched, surrendering my business to God in a new way, and collected over $250,000 in my first year in business. And now I've worked with over 1,000 other Christian coaches, helping them accomplish their entrepreneurial dreams. This podcast is designed to help you figure out how to design your business, how to price your signature offers, and how to sell and market to grow your client base with integrity and ease. Today, I want to talk about a topic that's a little bit different than what we normally get into here. So usually this podcast is focused on sales. It's focused on marketing. It's focused on client acquisition. Today, I want to start a 3-part series, though, on leadership and how to lead well as a Christian coach, how to show up in the marketplace, how to show up for your clients, how to show up for your family, how to show up in your life with great leadership. And so if you're looking for the sales content, jump into one of the other episodes. There's so many great episodes on sales and business development. If you're looking for leadership growth, this is the episode for you, and the next 2 will pair with it. I've got 15 ideas on how true leaders can lead well, specifically for Christian coaches and for the types of people who share the values and the faith that we have as we show up in business and in life. Today, we're going to talk about the first 5. And the first is this. It's the first thing on our rules of engagement at Faith to Influence, and something that's really important. I believe that true leaders lead with love, meaning that it's the foundation. Love is the foundation of everything else. This doesn't mean that we're not going to have discipline. It doesn't mean that we're not going to challenge people. It doesn't mean that we're not going to be bold, because all of those things are really important too. But leadership and boldness and challenge is so much more easily received when there's a foundation of love. Of course, we learn this from Jesus, who made love the foundation of everything that he did, of all the leadership, of all the invitations, of all the challenge, of all the goodness, of all the stories. There was a foundation of love. And that is how we're called to show up in the marketplace. We're called to reflect Jesus in the way that we work, in the way that we lead, in the way that we build. So let's remember that first piece. True leaders lead with love. The second reality is that true leaders receive leadership. So if you're a coach, a mentor, a leader, and you're providing leadership to others, it's so important for you to receive leadership also. And you may receive leadership from a coach that you hire. I think great coaches should have great coaches. I think that this is a foundation of coaching. Ultimately, you're probably listening to this. You're probably a coach, an entrepreneur, a leader, because you've received great leadership and it's inspired you to want to be a leader as well, and or because you've experienced the absence of great leadership at certain points in your life or your journey. And that has hurt, and you didn't want other people to have to experience that same absence of leadership. You wanted to provide it for others. And if that's your story, I want you to know that you can still find a great leader now and receive leadership yourself. When we're receiving leadership and growing, our leadership to others becomes more authentic and more rich. Make sure that you're receiving leadership and learning. But not only can we learn from others who are in leadership positions or in a coaching mentorship kind of role with us, we can also learn and receive leadership from our peers. And we can learn and receive leadership occasionally from our clients and the people that we lead. Let's just stay open-minded to receiving feedback and learning and growing over time. The third truth about leadership is that true leaders ask courageous questions. This is one of the things I think is a huge area of opportunity for many Christian coaches and entrepreneurs on sales calls and with their clients. It's being bold and courageous enough to ask the hard questions. On sales calls, this is such a valuable opportunity, and I think people sometimes shy away from it. When we ask courageous questions, they're oftentimes questions that help us clarify and make sure that we're actually on the same page with our prospects, with our team, with our clients. Oftentimes, the courageous, bold questions are the ones that help people feel and experience an emotion and a response to the conversation that we're having that actually calls them into a different level of action. And, sometimes when this comes out for us, it's things in a sales call or a coaching call in regards to asking people, what's going to happen if they don't solve the problem? That's a bold question. And then what would happen? And how would that feel? And who else would that affect besides you? These are bold questions. Or occasionally, sometimes it's just a question of like checking in on the truth of what somebody's saying. If somebody says something to you that feels true to them, but you feel like maybe it's not true, maybe it's just a story that they've created, that their mind has created to keep them safe. A bold, courageous question could sound like, is that true? Is that really true for you? And just checking back in and not accepting the first answer and having a deeper conversation about it. I was on a coaching call with a client and friend yesterday who's an amazing coach in person. And she was sharing a story with me about price points and the kinds of people that live where she lives and would they buy. And I don't know if the people that I know can afford this or if my target audience can afford that. And rather than simply accept that, I said, I don't know if that's true. I know that story is based in truths and it's based in realities of things that people have told you or things that you've experienced, but I don't know if the story's actually true. Here's why. And I shared a little bit. I said, what do you think? Like, is it possible that story's not completely true? And having that bold, courageous conversation, asking that bold, courageous question can change everything. It can shift perspective like that. And this is the sort of thing that we can do for our clients in coaching calls. It's the sort of things that we can do with our prospects in sales calls. Asking people, how committed are you to that goal? Is a bold or courageous question to some. And it's an important one. And I think, even in rejection or in objection handling, which oftentimes feels like rejection to us, I think because when we get an objection in a sales conversation, many coaches and entrepreneurs' initial impulse is to feel rejected. They just move on quickly. They get away from the pain of that no probably too quickly. When they could, instead of escaping it, be bold and courageous in hearing the objection and stick with the conversation a little bit longer. If somebody says to me, it's too much or it feels really expensive, I'm going to say, yeah, I totally get it. It is expensive. It is a big investment. Tell me more about that for you. Now, you're going to recognize that I'm not asking the bold, courageous question oftentimes with a bold, courageous tone. I'm asking it with an easy, light, soft, loving tone. So it's easy for the other person to receive the question, even in its boldness. Or oftentimes when people say, well, I want to talk to my spouse, I'm going to say, awesome. I'd talk to my spouse about a decision like this too. Let me ask you a question though. Have you made your decision for you yet? If he says, whatever you think, babe, I trust you. Do you know what you want to do? That's a bold question, but it gets us to a greater capacity for truth. And that's what I'm looking for. These courageous, bold questions is to come to a greater degree of truth with one another, to help our clients experience greater truth in their own minds, to help us get on the same page and experience greater truth in our own relationship with people, and to have a standard for truth and possibility in the way that we show up in sales calls and coaching calls. Let's ask those bold, courageous questions. The fourth idea on how a coach can lead well is that true leaders help people remember who they really are. And what I mean by that is true leaders help people remember the best of who they are. They help people reconnect with who God created them to really be. They help people reconnect with the very best of themselves. True leaders see the best in people and help them remember that best, especially because in day-to-day life is hard. We're not always going to be at our best. We're going to have ups and downs. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do the wrong thing. I do this all the time. I've made so many mistakes. I've had so many downs amid plenty of ups. I believe that true leaders, though, are encouragers in the fact that they help people remember the best of who they are and the best of who they can be and associate to that version of themselves rather than getting stuck associating with a version of themselves that's made mistakes. Rather than having people feel guilty or feel like they're not good enough, a true leader helps people recognize how great they actually are and how God sees them and how great they can be. And that remembering of who they really are can call people into a totally different set of thoughts, actions, behaviors, results. So be a great finder. See the best in people. Believe in them even more than they can believe in themselves right now, in such a way that they might remember who they really are and the greatness that God created inside of them and what's possible for them. This is a gift that you can give to people. And the fifth and final tip I want to share today on leading well is that true leaders focus on patterns. It's so easy to focus on a single conversation, a single moment, or to hold people in their worst moment, right? This is part of remembering who people really are. It's not holding them in their worst moment, but it's also recognizing what is the pattern. And oftentimes the pattern of what we're seeing in a relationship with somebody, a prospect, a client, a friend, a family member, the pattern is deeper than the surface level behavior. And so I think we're quick to solve the surface level behavior, focus on the surface level behavior, try to change the surface level behavior, when the reality is that there may be a pattern, an emotional pattern, a thought pattern, a belief system, an old story that has been there for a long time that needs to be solved to change the surface level behavior. If we find the deep-seated pattern and we solve that, the deep-seated problem, the mental emotional block, then the behavior can change so much more easily. And so that's one side of this, is can you pay attention to the things that your prospects and clients are not saying that are below the surface? Can you see something that they don't yet see? A pattern of like a language pattern that keeps coming through that illustrates a belief that they have that maybe they haven't consciously considered yet, and then share that with them. What an opportunity that would be. Or if you were a sales manager and you had a sales team, could you recognize that the problem that's preventing people from getting the results they want isn't necessarily a work ethic problem, but it's about a pattern of fear of rejection or judgment or something else that's much deeper than work ethic. And that maybe it's possible that your sales team is filled with really hard workers with great integrity, who want to follow through, who want to work hard, who are willing to do the hard work, but they're stuck because of a mental block that's causing them to avoid the real work. If we solve the mental block and focus on the pattern of that's maybe existed a lot longer than this single behavior or the lack of results over the last few weeks, there's probably something there. But then there's also the side of sometimes deciding what to let go. There are times that maybe we get a little too focused on perfection, or we can create a scenario in which other people are too focused on perfection, because when somebody makes a mistake, we always point it out. And if we're always pointing out the single mistake, the one problem, I understand setting a precedent, but there are times where we get into a single problem and we try to solve the one thing that we saw in such a way that it's unnecessary, and it puts people on eggshells rather than taking a look at the broader pattern. Let me explain what I mean here. When I worked for a former company doing sales, I had a sales manager who would occasionally pop into the room while I was on a sales call and listen to what I was saying. He wasn't hearing the other side of the conversation. I was on a phone call, but he would hear what I was saying, and he would, I'd get off the call and he would go deep into what I said or didn't say and why he thinks this or that. And I remember having to defend myself and feel like he didn't understand the full picture. He wasn't listening to the other person. That's not what I normally say. This was something I said this one time because of what that person said this one time. Or I didn't say that because this is what was happening on the call. And we ended up spending so much time going back and forth on what I should have or shouldn't have said on that single sales call, in a way that really created a lot of stress for me every time I saw him walk into the room. Because I was like, oh no, he's going to pay attention to every single word I say or don't say and judge it without having the full picture. And oftentimes, like I said, it felt like he was hammering things that were single situational moments that weren't part of the larger picture of how I was holding sales calls. What would have been nice would have been if he sat in the room for a full day and listened to me on 5 sales calls, and then took notes and noticed what were the patterns of how I showed up in the sales call. And he said, hey, I'm noticing that when you receive objections, you do this, because I saw that on 3 of these calls. And then we're actually solving a higher level problem and something that is actually a lot more relevant than solving like, hey, you said this, and I think you should have said that in this one situation. Now, obviously, this is nuanced, but I want to invite you to consider paying attention to the patterns of your prospects, the patterns of your clients, the patterns of the people that you lead, and focus on solving the bigger problems by solving the bigger patterns and looking below the surface to find out if there's a deeper emotional or mental pattern or block that needs to be solved. Okay, so these are the 5 for today. We've got 15 of these. We're going to have 2 more parts to this season or this little series in the podcast. But today, 5 things that are true about Christian coaches and leadership and how to do it well. Number 1, true leaders lead with love. Number 2, true leaders receive leadership. Number 3, true leaders ask courageous questions. Number 4, true leaders help people remember who they really are. And number 5, true leaders focus on patterns. Let's lead well in the marketplace. By the way, if you'd like to have some support with leading well, specifically in sales calls and growing your business, we're running a really cool masterclass and training right now. It's free. It's called Land More Coaching Clients. And I would love for you to join us in this masterclass. You can join us by going to www.landcoachingclients.com. It's a 90-minute training. It's some of our best content on sales, business development, overcoming blocks and patterns mentally around sales and business growth. If you've had any blocks there, we're going to unravel those in this masterclass. Landcoachingclients.com. Come and join us. I'd love to see you there live on Zoom. It's going to be fun. God bless you all. I'll talk to you more soon.